Hello, my name is DJ Jordan, and I want to welcome everyone to the special virtual press conference of the Woodson Center, where we are unveiling a new initiative today, the Voices of Black Mothers United. We have a number of special speakers today who will have initial remarks that will be about 2 minutes each. And then after the remarks are done, we will take a few questions from reporters. In this new pandemic world where we're doing Zoom events and virtual events, it's going to be quite different than our normal press conference that are in person. However, we still want to serve and get this message to all of the reporters who are taking time out of their busy day to cover this important issue. And so if you have any questions, we would ask for you to wait towards the end of the press conference to put it in the chat, and then I will verbally ask the question on your behalf. But for this, we want to have several speakers who represent the Woodson Center, including Mr. Woodson, who is the founder and president. And we also have several mothers who are leaders in their communities who themselves have lost a child or loved one to senseless neighborhood violence. We also have two law enforcement professionals who are a part of the initiative and have been consulting this effort. Again, we want to thank you for joining the Woodson Center special launch of the Voices of Black Mothers United. And we want to start off with none other than the founder and president, Mr. Bob Woodson.
We're really pleased to be able to host and sponsor the organization. For the last 40 years, the Woodson Center has been engaged in assisting low-income leaders in high crime, drug-infested neighborhood to devise solutions coming from within the community. That many of the demands today to defund the police in response to violence is being advocated by people who don't have to suffer the consequence of their advocacy. They live in safe communities. And so we believe strongly that the missing voice in this whole discussion about law enforcement and community safety are the people experiencing the problem, and they are the mothers who have lost children. I can identify with them because my 29-year-old brother was murdered, leaving behind a wife and 5 children. My 23-year-old nephew was also gunned down by a young man who lived a block from him. His mother, both mothers have to greet each other every week at the grocery store. So this is personal to me. But for months, we have been meeting with the mothers around the country, and they have taken their grief and turned it into positive energy to reach out and help others. We're also delighted that we have the cooperation of the law enforcement, because they are the ones that are critical. And because the problem that we have is closing cases. In St. Louis last spring, 16 murders occurred of young people under the age of 16, but only 1 arrest. And that's because of the lack of trust between the community and law enforcement. Well, we have an answer for that that you will hear in this press conference when Chief Monroe will talk about a creative cooperation that resulted in improvement. We want to let you know this is a solution-oriented organization. The mothers will engage in 3 activities: family support to provide grief counseling and support for moms who lost children. And the other will be support for local interventions that have proven effective to reduce violence, that the solutions come from the same zip code as the problem. And then the 4th is support promoting positive policing to join with them. So we are excited at the Woodson Center to be the convener, and we believe that the mothers are the unrecognized and untapped resource, and we're delighted to be able to host it, and we're anxious for the public to have an opportunity to support the Woodson Center's effort.
Thank you, Mr. Woodson. Next is the director of the initiative, Ms. Sylvia Bennett.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come to you and speak before you. Again, my name is Sylvia Bennett Stone. I'm a director of Voices of Black Mothers United, but most importantly, I am a mom. I am a mom who lost my daughter and her best friend to violence. And life as I once knew it would never be the same. I have for over years searched to try to find the opportunity to bring forth the discussion about what's happening in our communities. And Mr. Woodson has given us that opportunity. We as mothers have often been told that you need to just go be quiet. You need to get over it. But there's no getting over putting your child in the ground due to the decision of someone else taking their lives. There's no getting over that. Every time I see another mother on the TV in our communities wailing and heart is broken, yes, it takes me back. But yet it tells me we've got to do something. Enough is enough. It's time for us to take a stand. So we are collectively, we have over 2,500 mothers throughout the states, and we are taking a stand as one voice. We have mothers like Miss Nita Royal in Indiana and Miss Shirley Muhammad in Pittsburgh and Rhonda Knight in Atlanta, who is saying we're standing with you because in our communities we're experiencing the same thing. We're coming together, we're coming with solutions. We're saying we do not support defunding the police because we feel as though we need to police in our communities, but yet we want police accountable for their action. Let's make that very clear. We want them accountable for bad policing. So we're saying we have solutions to help police get to that point of where they are what they're called to be, and that is peacemakers.
Thank you, Ms. Sylvia. Next, the Chief of Police in Montgomery County, Maryland, Chief Marcus Jones.
Good morning. Good morning to all. And I want to thank Mr. Woodson and these courageous mothers who have come together in unity to express an issue of having the ability to express their voices and to really speak from a standpoint of being victimized by these acts, senseless acts that occur in all of our communities, particularly communities of color all across the country. But as the chief of police here in Montgomery County, these things happen here as well. And I am more than honored to be a part of, to provide some solutions and some assistance with them in partnership to work all across the country, but also here in Montgomery County, in order for us to be able to solve these types of crimes, but also to provide a voice to the voiceless. Too many times in the discussion of law enforcement all across this country, these folks who are just traumatized by these senseless acts that occur in our communities really get pushed to the side. And we have other discussions about policing and about other things occurring in our community, but really not having the discussion about how we are going to prevent and stop these senseless killings to continue to further traumatize mothers and families across our country. So with that being said, I want to say it is an honor and a pleasure for me to offer whatever I can from my 35 plus years of experience here in Montgomery County and in law enforcement, to be able to provide the assistance necessary in order to provide a partnership that I think is important when we are trying to solve these problems in our community, to have a partnership. And I am so happy that this group is willing to help us bridge that gap and to work towards good policing methods that are able to solve crimes, but also able to prevent crimes and to bridge that gap to develop better relationships in policing all across the country. And I'm willing to work with any police chief in the United States, and I will be spreading the message that this organization is worthwhile. This initiative is worthwhile in a point that we need to work towards this to have safer communities all across this country. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Chief Jones. Up next is going to be former Police Chief Rodney Monroe of Charlotte, Mecklenburg, who has also practiced law enforcement in the Washington, D.C. area.
Good morning, everyone, and a special good morning to the mothers that have gathered here today. As Chief Jones referenced, there is a direct role for law enforcement to play, not only in dealing with the violence within many of our communities, but also sharing the load and the burden with families, mothers such as yourself, and how to bring more peace within our streets and within our hearts. I've had the fortunate pleasure of being in law enforcement for over 40 years, starting my career in Washington, D.C. and becoming a chief in 3 other cities in the U.S. And one of the things that I found starting back in D.C., that I believe that the loss of life, the taking of life in any community is one of the most horrific things that could ever happen. And I started my career early on, whereby in each of my assignments, and even as chief of police, I made it a point of responding to 99% of every homicide that occurred within my jurisdiction. Because I felt, again, that someone had to stand up and put forth not only the effort, but also the empathy and the compassion to show that this is something that cannot be tolerated within our communities. Once I reached Richmond, Virginia, I established what's known now as the Homicide Support Group. And within the Homicide Support Group's spectrum is an opportunity for mothers such as yourself to come together, to partner with law enforcement in order to create greater emphasis, not only within the community, but within our law enforcement arena as well, to bring empathy to homicide investigators and others that are investigating these cases, providing services to families and a place for families to gather on a monthly basis to not only talk about their loved ones, talk about their cases, but also receive regular updates from law enforcement, prosecutors, and others, so that we follow this path, not only once the incident happens, but throughout the process. I have members that have been part of my homicide support groups for 10, 12, 15 years. One young lady who started out early in Charlotte, when I first came to Charlotte in 2008, when she lost her daughter, 15 years later, when I returned, 12 years later, when I returned to conduct a study of the Charlotte's Homicide Support Group, she was in that meeting, and it was announced that night, the closing of a 12-year-old case that had lingered that long, but she hung in there every month attending those meetings. We've been able to retrain law enforcement officers on how to be a little more conscious when they're investigating their cases, how they contact families, how they respond to families, how they provide updates to families. These are tools that I believe are needed within law enforcement. We just recently conducted 2 case studies, both in Richmond and Charlotte, on their homicide support group, and they've shown some tremendous outcomes. You know, I'm a firm believer that when you can partner with families doing the active investigation of these cases, there's a much greater chance of these cases being resolved much faster. There's greater witness cooperation. There's better coordination with the district attorney's office as it relates to putting these cases together. We saw in both Richmond and Charlotte significant increases in our closure rates for homicides. And I attribute it directly back to the support that we've received from so many families through our homicide support groups. We've learned different ways of processing crime scenes from mothers and families across both Richmond and Charlotte to bring about more humanity in the way that we go about processing crime scenes. We've seen better notifications to families.
We've seen better support on the scene when families arrive to the scene of homicide, being able to separate them, providing them with a lead detective that will keep them advised of what's going on throughout their case, not just that night, but weeks, months, and even years into the investigation of those particular cases. So there is a bridge, there is an opportunity, there is a way for us to all come together to provide not only safety within our communities, but a voice that's needed in our communities to better understand the trauma and effects of losing a loved one to violence in our streets. And I thank you for this opportunity, and I continue to pledge my support and commitment to your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Monroe. And now we go on to the stories of 5 mothers who are in this press conference. The first being Miss Lorraine Taylor, who now lives in Mississippi, but suffered her tragic story in Oakland, California. Miss Taylor. I'm sorry, Miss Taylor, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, you're good.
Yes, I am Lorraine Taylor, founder of 1,000 Mothers to Prevent Violence. We as Voices of Black Mothers United, a proud project of the Woodson Center, are here today to honor the lives of our children lost to street violence. We're also here to raise awareness to the devastating impact this pandemic has on families, our communities, and our nation. We are here to say no more senseless violence. In the year 2000, I lost both my twin sons at the same time to gun violence in the city of Oakland. Abdi and Obadiah were 22-year-old college students. They were actually working their way through college. When I got the devastating news, it changed my life forever. As a social worker, I was no longer able to maintain employment. My doctor placed me on long-term disability for post-traumatic stress and depression. That was also devastating. I continued to worry about my only living son, Gregory. We want to take a stand. It's time now that we take a stand. So I'm grateful to Dr. Woodson and Sylvia for calling on us as grieving mothers to come together, take a stand to senseless violence today. Tomorrow may be too late. While Voices of Black Mothers United do not push for defunding the police, we are concerned about providing more resources for training and law enforcement so they can understand what we're going through. As a former advisor to the Oakland Police Department, I found that bridging that gap in communication between law enforcement and grieving mothers working together. So we're calling on all of the baby boomers and everyone to come together to join us as we take a stand against violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. And now we will hear from Ms. Mary Nelson of Syracuse, New York.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Nelson. Lived in the Syracuse area for 53 years. I'm presently employed at Upstate Medical University. We're a trauma hospital. Trauma hospital is where all the victims come for trauma. I never thought that I'd be part of the trauma and part of the tragedy here in my city. I'm also employed part-time at the Vera House, a domestic violence shelter, where I see a lot of women come through. Sometimes they don't make it through. They're part of the violence. Also, part-time employed at the County District Attorney's Office, where I'm the voice for the victims in the advocacy department. In 2002, I lost my nephew, Daryl Patterson, to gun violence. And I never thought violence would really hit our family. But we always gave, we gave, we gave, we gave. And my mother always sheltered her babies away from any trauma, tragedy. She kept us away from that. In 2013, I'm my mother's oldest child, her oldest sibling. I'm my sister and brother's oldest sibling. I made a promise to my mother that I would take care of my sister and my brother. 12 years later, from 2002, I lost my only brother to another act of violence. Christmas Eve in my mother's house. And at that time, I started questioning, I'm being honest, I questioned God. Why do you keep taking away from me? Why all I had was my sister. And I made a promise through my brother's murder trial for young people who took my brother's life, was somebody I helped through the Mary Nelson Center. I became a non-for-profit in 2009, where I helped families and resources. And he was the shooter that took my brother's life. My sister and I endured the murder trial. We went there every day together. I never knew how much the trauma from losing her son in 2002 was taking a toll on her. In 2017, I lost my only and last sibling. And here I go again. I said, Lord, you doing it again to me. Why? That little voice said to me, I keep my strongest for last. One day I went to the store, Sacred Melody Shop. It's a spiritual shop. And I found this rock when I was shopping. It said, you are not alone. That gave me more courage to keep fighting, to keep fighting. In 2002, a month and a half after I lost my nephew, I started a program called the Annual Backpack Giveaway, where I make sure kids get backpacks and school supplies. You know, when you got God into the equation, you never know how he's working with you. He took that event from 2002 to where we at now. We have attendance over 21,000 youth and their families. God had a plan for me. And I also the plan that what's happening right now, Mr. Woodson. I thank you, sir. I thank you so much. You bring all us mothers together for a plan where so many times our voices were silent. We didn't have a voice and people looked past us. They say, you know what? Your child is dead. Just get over it. You cannot get over grief. You cannot get over losing your child. It hurts. I never lost a child, but I lost a nephew, and I lost my brother, and I lost my sister. I stand alone, women. I stand alone with you, and with you 150%. We are now not alone. Mr. Woodson, thank you. Thank you to all the women, all of you women. We got so much work to do. Let's do it and say enough is enough. Enough is enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Before we go on to our next few mothers, I wanted to remind everyone watching that you can learn more about these stories at voicesofblackmothers.com. That's voicesofblackmothers.com. We have 3 more stories to come. Next is Ms. Carolyn Johnson Turner of Birmingham, Alabama.
Good morning, everyone. I am Carolyn Johnson Turner. I am the founder of the Parents Against Violence organization. My son, Rodriguez, he was 20 years old. He was shot and killed while he was attempting to park his car at a birthday party he was attending. There were some guys out there who had gotten to a fight or altercation or what have you, and they started shooting. But one of those bullets from their gun pierced the windshield of Rodriguez's car and struck him in his head and killed him. It devastated my life. I had 2 other children. My 17-year-old son was also there at the birthday party with Rodriguez, and he saw what happened to his brother. It was something that I couldn't imagine would ever happen to my family. But when it did, I knew that I had to do something, because when he was murdered, there were so many kids out there that night that saw what happened, but no one would come forward to give the police information about what happened to him. And so as I kept calling the police station, they would tell me that they were trying to find out who killed him, that they were looking for the person that did it, but they didn't have the manpower to keep working on his case. And that's when I discovered that they did not have a cold case unit to work on cases like Rodriguez's case. So I challenged them to create a department so they could work on cases like Rodriguez's. And then I kept running into other families who had the same problem that I did. They couldn't get any justice for their children. So that's when we band together and got the Birmingham Police Department to open a cold case unit to work on cases like Rodriguez's case. In addition to that, we worked very hard to reduce violence throughout the communities in Birmingham. And it has been a blessing to so many families, because so many of those kids could have been dead, in gangs, on drugs, dropped out of school. But because of the work that we were able to do, we were able to save so many lives. And working with the police department and working with our district attorney, city council, and mayor, that really gave us a boost in what we were doing in our communities. And also, I just got a call yesterday from two families who have lost loved ones, one 18-year-old girl who was killed and an 18-year-old boy. And our families are hurting, and they feel like they don't have a voice. They feel like there's no help, because we see so many times on television when a Black person is killed by a white person or a police officer, there's so much support. But when it's us, just like the other mother said, they're telling us to be quiet, get over it, to just deal with it. But it's hard. It hurts. I mean, this is a pain I carry every day. This is my son right here, and I carry him in my heart, and it hurts. I miss him. I want him. And I'm going to do everything in my power to keep fighting for Rodriguez and all of these kids who have lost their lives to senseless violence for no reason. My child was not doing anything to anybody. He was doing what a 20-year-old should do. He should go to a birthday party and come home safely without being killed. But that didn't happen, and it destroyed my life. And I want to thank Mr. Woodson. I want to thank Sylvia, Bennett Stone. Thank you guys so much for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this organization where so many dynamic women are speaking out now. We have a voice, and we can speak up for our children and for other victims and other mothers. And I love you guys. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mrs. Turner. We have two more mothers left. Next will be Miss Beverly Smith Brown of Washington, D.C.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you. Thank you to Mr. Woodson. Thank you to Miss Sylvia Bennett Stone and everyone on this call. My name is Beverly Smith Brown. I am the founder and executive director of Mama Safe Haven here in Washington, D.C. I am a native Washingtonian. I was raised in Southeast D.C., where it was once called the murder capital. And unfortunately, we slowly moving back to that title. My story is one that I am not a grieving mother. However, I work as well with the Alliance of Concerned Men. So I'm on the front line, and I am responding to crime in our community, where I meet grieving mothers way too often. In 2017 is when I began that career, October 2017. And then in October 2018, it hit my family. I responded to a crime in the Ward 7 Bennett area, and it was my nephew that was gunned down. He was shot 18 times, and he was shot in his face 2 blocks away from where my sister lives today. 15 days later, my sister's second son, her only son, was killed as well. Separate situation. We were at the funeral home twice in 1 month. Since then, we have started the Mama Safe Haven Healing Center, where we wrap our arms around mothers, providing grieving support. We provide retreats. We take them on retreats to really give them a sense of safe space. You know, when I think about the numbers of grieving mothers that's coming, you know, a young boy was killed, a 1-year-old in a car with his dad, you know, talking to that mom. And then we have moms who are losing multiple children to gun violence. It's not okay. I am excited to be the chapter lead for the Voices of Black Mothers United. It is time for us to take a stand. It is time for our voice to be heard. I hear a lot about defunding the police. I personally am not for defunding the police, and I am excited to stand with women and men who believe the same. We want to come in and partner with the police as it relates to bringing community involvement in policing. When we look at the crime rate in our community and the amount of attention, or I'll say the way the attention is put on that crime, is not okay. It's not okay. The funds that's going towards in our community, it needs to be put into organizations that is doing the work to wrap their arms around these mothers, because the healing process, it takes a long time. It's not just, you know, you see a newspaper clipping and everybody is sad for that day, you attend a funeral. But I mean, it is long after that. We receive calls daily from moms who can't sleep. Some have committed suicide. We just heard a mom who has lost her whole career, and no one signs up to be a grieving mother. I don't want to be a grieving mother. So I'm standing in unison with mothers who have lost their children to gun violence. My nephews were gunned down. We have nieces and nephews who are hurting. We have to think about the children of these, the siblings of the children who are murdered in the streets, and how they're going to go on, and what type of pain and what type of hurt that they're carrying around due to the loss. And then to witness the murder is unacceptable. So the Voices of Black Mothers United, the Bob Woodson Center, wrap arms around Mama Safe Haven, supported with funds that are needed, that we are not receiving now, but we are receiving it through the support of the Bob Woodson Center to be able to provide grief counseling. We do support groups every Monday at 7 p.m. via Zoom with moms, and we wrap our arms around them in a real way. And I am excited again to be a part of this platform, and just want to encourage everyone that's listening to support this initiative. Because when you support this initiative, you are saving a generation. We are breaking generational curses, because it's a mindset that it tells the people that you don't matter, that your child life doesn't matter when you shut us up. But no more will they be able to shut us up. And we are grateful for the Chief of Police that's on here now, Mr. Monroe. Thank you for your time. And we just want to call in everyone who has the power to be a part of this initiative to join forces with us as we begin to heal our community and prevent Black on Black crime and crime happening in our community. And just want to close with, it's not okay for the police to kill, and we are not for that. So we are excited about our advocacy and our policing policies, changing policies, and sitting at the table with the police to be able to come up with a solution of how we can best keep our community safe. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and Voices of Black Mothers United forever.
Thank you so much, Ms. Smith-Brown. Our final mother story will come from Ms. Betty Sweet. For the reporters who are on this call, feel free to go ahead and chat in your questions. We will have a few questions before we end this press conference, and they could be for the mothers or for Mr. Woodson or for our police individuals. But at this time, we will hear from Ms. Sweet, who is from Los Angeles, California.
Good morning, everyone. You hear me? 16 years ago, my only son, 18-year-old Jason, was robbed of $500 and murdered. 5 years later, the murderer was apprehended, and he, instead of going to court, he decided that he would plead guilty, and he was given 25 to life. I wanted to know what happened. I wanted to see what he looked like in court. So I wrote him and asked him to tell me, let me know what happened. And when he got my letter, he responded right away with a 10-page, 8-page legal size letter saying how happy he was that I had contacted him because he had tried to get in contact with me, but no one would give him any information. And from that time on, we have been communicating for the last 11 years. And 2 years ago, we started writing this screenplay called Murder, Forgiveness, and Redemption. And it tells our story. It tells my journey toward forgiveness and his journey toward redemption. And I've been in contact with his brother and his father, and they're so intelligent and so creative. And I have grown to really care for these men. And I was driving home the other day, and I just started bawling because I wanted to know what my son would think about this. And all of a sudden, I felt this calmness come over me. I could feel my son in the car holding my hands like we used to. And he said, "Mommy, isn't that what you prayed for? The title of your book, Survivor to Thriver, A Mother's Journey Toward Peace After Her Son's Murder. And then your Right to Heal program. And one of your strategies for healing is to forgive it out. Mama, I'm proud of you." My son is proud of me. And I am so proud to be with this organization. I want to thank Sylvia. I want to thank Dr. Woodson. I call him Dr. Woodson because he is the healer of communities. And I equally applaud these mothers, these Black mothers who have the tenacity and the audacity to take life's sourest lemons and turn it into lemon meringue pie. Children make lemonade, but these, we strong Black mothers, we make sweet, delicious pie to serve to the masses. And in the words of Dr. Woodson, the voices of Black Mothers United is officially unleashed.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sweet. At this time, we're going to take a few questions from reporters who are covering this virtual press conference. I also want to acknowledge 3 other mothers who are on this call who are part of the initiative: Ms. Shirley Muhammad from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Also, Ms. Danita Royal, who is here joining us from Indianapolis, Indiana, as well as Ms. Rhonda Knight, who is with us from Atlanta, Georgia. And so for the first question is from Jamie Jackson from the American Urban Radio Network, primarily for the police chiefs on the call, but the mothers can answer as well, is what is your primary message to the local elected officials, the mayors, the city council people, on what they need to do first to stop the rising murder and crime that we experienced in 2020? Well, we start with Chief Jones first, if you can.
So thank you. I think it's very important for our elected officials to understand that there is a need for the resources for our victims. And when we look at the victims' families, and we talk about really the focus of how we address these things. And I think it was noted when you look at the lack of resources that some of the police departments had when these grieving mothers had issues with their cases being solved, with victim support. Those things have to be addressed. They have to be funded, and provide law enforcement with as many tools as possible. There should be never a homicide that occurs in any of our jurisdictions that we are not working towards closure in order to try to find the culprits who committed those homicides. And that takes resources. It takes the courage to be able to put these resources again. And I always want to tell our public officials to never forget our victims. Sometimes they're always looking forward, but we don't look backwards sometimes. And sometimes we have to look backwards because there are people who are still hurting, who cases have not been solved. And so that would be one of the things I would push forward to make sure our local officials were aware of.
Thank you, Chief Monroe.
Well, I think Chief Jones is absolutely correct. You know, when I first arrived at Charlotte, and again, as I stated earlier, I responded to every homicide. When I responded to my first couple of homicides, I would see one or two detectives responding, processing the scene. I felt that was totally inadequate. So when you talk about resources, we moved from 2 or 3 detectives responding to a scene to a team of 5 to 7 with the sergeant. We brought in our gang unit. They were required to respond. Our narcotics unit was required to respond because as someone mentioned earlier, a case doesn't get cold a month or 6 months. It gets cold 48 hours later. So if you're not doing everything that you can within that first 24 to 48 hours, that case can go cold very quickly. And being able to bring those resources to bear immediately and committed, and where those detectives didn't go home until they pursued every last lead that was out there. And what I found that the sooner you can close these cases, the greater opportunity you have for not having a retaliatory incident, and then the better and the more comfort you can start bringing to families immediately. So that commitment has to be made, and it has to be made internally, and it has to be supported externally by those officials that control the purse strings of the department, because those are funds that do go back into the community. And supporting homicide support groups to be able to bring families together, because the grieving doesn't stop after the funeral. I've seen mothers and worked with mothers 10, 12 years later. Some of their cases have been solved, some of their cases haven't, but they still come every month to that homicide support group to bring comfort to other mothers. Cases that are still open, detectives are there every month to give updates. Prosecutors are there every month to continue to give updates. They attend court proceedings with one another. It's a beautiful thing that can be created. And all of that's created by the mothers and the families of these victims of our community. So that's my 2 cents. Support those efforts, not defund the police, but fund those efforts that bring police and communities closer together.
And last, I wanted to give one of the mothers an opportunity if you wanted to answer that question. What is your primary message to your local government officials about reducing crime in your neighborhood?
Yes, sir. This is Sylvia Bennett Stone. I will concur with Chief Monroe. There must be a conversation between the community and law enforcement. We must have a place at the table now. We must be able to express and to talk about without fear of what's going on in our communities and what we need to happen in order for us to stay safe. So bringing together law enforcement and the community as a team so we can have that conversation is going to be a great start. I would commend our local mayor and his initiative to establish a task force that would include community leaders. However, we must make sure that victims and mothers such as myself have a seat at that table.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the Daily Signal and Virginia Allen. What are the next steps here with this initiative? What is the first act that you are going to do past this launch date? Ms. Sylvia, as the director, can you ask that question, answer that question first?
Yes, absolutely. We're going to continue what we've been doing, and that is recruiting mothers from all states. However, and most importantly, we're going to look at what's the best way to establish those partnerships. What can we do to get the district attorney, the police chief, the mayors to come to that table?
I would like to respond if I could.
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Woodson.
One of the things that the Woodson Center is doing is we desperately need to raise the resources so that we can help to develop the structures for them to do outreach. Right now, millions of dollars are being given to so-called social advocacy groups to address systemic racism. Yet people inside and whatever their remedies are, it has nothing to do with what you heard here this morning. So what we're trying to persuade private donors, foundations, and government to invest in communities where the solutions are. And that's what the greater emphasis, not only invest, but also recognize and come forth with other ways of supporting these mothers, everyone coming to the table. So that's what the Woodson Center is going to be spending these next steps, getting the resources we need, and also providing the kind of technical support that they need so that we can expand this movement, so that every state that needs this organization, we can have a chapter.
Thank you. Our last question is from J.C. Derrick. The Woodson Center has traditionally worked with faith-based organizations. He wanted to hear from some of the mothers, what is the role of churches in the faith-based community in this work of actually reducing violence in your community? If any mother wanted to respond. Ms. Lorraine Taylor, why don't you go first?
You're on mute, Lorraine.
Mute.
There we go.
I am a leader in the city of Oakland, and we are happy to report that we are supported by one of the churches, many of the churches in that community. I just got a call the other day that they are building a new, or remodeling a house next door to the church, and they have provided space for us. We need everyone to join us. We know that there is something called love that we all need. And when we look at the church, we think of God and we think of love. So we do invite all of the churches, the faith-based communities to join us in putting an end to violence. And we want to say that there is hope. We find hope when the churches are involved.
DJ, if I could.
Yes, Mr. Woodson.
23 years ago in Washington, D.C., in a place called Bennett Terrace, there were 53 murders in the 5 square block area because of warring factions in an area called Bennett Terrace, public housing. In cooperation with the Alliance of Concerned Men, a group of men who are from that community, ex-offenders who've been redeemed, and they were witnesses to we were able to bring the warring factions to our office downtown D.C. And we signed a peace treaty, and the police, Rodney Monroe was the area commander at the time, and we met at First Rock Church, where Rodney brought 25 of his officers, and we brought 18 of the kids. And at that church, we had breakfast, and we formed a partnership between these kids. And as a consequence of this partnership at the church, we didn't have a single gang-related murder for 12 years. From 53. So we have models that have worked in the past when you bring all of these elements together. And there are other efforts around the country that go unrecognized and unappreciated. And so what we hope to do is do our outreach look for solutions from within the community suffering the problem. But the church, First Rock Church, was a critical partner in that. And so that's what we hope to expand upon.
Well, thank you for those answers. We are going to conclude this press conference now. We want to thank everybody for joining this event to launch the Voices of Black Mothers United initiative, one of the new programs of the Woodson Center. If you missed any part of this virtual press conference, we're going to have a video of this on YouTube, on the Woodson Center's YouTube page. You can access that by going to woodsoncenter.org. Or you can also go directly to this initiative's website, voicesofblackmothers.com. That's voicesofblackmothers.com. So I want to thank you all for participating, and we look forward to you being a part of this initiative moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Woodson
Mr.
and
All right.
Sylvia and all the
Stay
mothers.
healthy.
Have a good day.
You
All right.
too.
Great job, everybody.
Yes.